Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, it's another downtrodden post-game pod from the second in less than 24 hours, Timberwolves bad loss to Portland on the road in Portland. We'll break down what happened in this one. It was a bit of a different loss than Tuesday's, but equally as disappointing. And I think it's fair to ask the question now, is the sky falling? We'll try and answer that next. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Thursday, everybody, and not so happy Thursday in Wolves land. The Timberwolves lost for the second time in as many days in the same arena against the same shorthanded and supposedly bad Portland Trailblazers team. But this was just a miserable trip to the City of Roses for the Wolves. I'm going to try it. I'm not going to try. I'm going to be candid with it doesn't take expert analysis to tell you that the Wolves are just playing bad basketball right now. Now, they lost Wednesday in different fashion than they lost Tuesday, so I do want to get into that a bit. But kind of my overall, overarching takes, sitting where they're at right now, what is it? We'll get into some of the X's and O's from this game and some of the individual performances that, there were a couple studs when I did studs and duds on Tuesday, a couple guys that played well. Not so much on Wednesday. I'm not sure anyone really played well for the Wolves. This was just a really overall, I think dud is a good word to use. A dud of a performance by the Timberwolves, everybody that saw the floor. So a lot to get to today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you could find Locked On Wolves. You could also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder about the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox every single day. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. Again, LockedOnDaily.com. All right. So here's how the week has gone. If you haven't listened to all the shows, Monday, I talked about how the loss to Miami on Sunday was just a horrible collapse, up 8 with 4 minutes left against a team with no Jimmy Butler, a team you should beat, and just the way that fell apart. I was pretty positive. Monday was a split show. I was upset with the performance, but also I thought it was a blip. Tuesday, it was a much more positive show because I was like, look, they're a top 10 offense, they're a top 10 defense. They easily could be 7-3 if the Miami game doesn't happen the way that it unfolds. Pythagorean record, 7-3, the whole thing. Yesterday's show was almost entirely negative, telling it like it is, with also the caveat of hey, these things happen. It's a long season. Teams have bad stretches all the time, etc. Now today, I've continued to swing in that direction. This is not. There's no positivity here. The one thing I will say. Well, actually, no. Let's start here. I don't want to. I can't start with with anything positive. This is, I think, the best way to look at why, first of all, why this feels so terrible, I think, to Timberwolves fans. I'm not trying to explain everyone's feelings to them, but I think this is the mindset of the fan base for why this is so bad. First of all, anytime a team loses 3 straight games to teams they should beat, it should be disappointing. Yes. So fans have every right to be upset. But think back to last year. The Timberwolves did not lose 3 games in a row ever in the regular season. In 82, they never lost more than 2 games in a row. They eventually did in the second round of the playoffs against Denver. Remember, they took the 2-0 lead. They won their first 6 games of the playoffs. Felt like they were going to sweep the playoffs. Not really, but we were all kind of jokingly looking at each other sideways hey, could this happen? And then Denver rattles off 3 straight wins. And how do the Wolves respond? Remember that game, what would that be? Game 6 win in Denver to push the series to Minnesota last year in the playoffs? When the Wolves had lost 3, that was a home game. Denver had home court. That's right, because they were the 2 seed. So the Wolves won at home after losing 3 straight. They won by 45 points at home in that dominant Game 6 performance after losing 3 in a row for the first time all season. And then in the conference finals, they were down 3-0 to Dallas before they won by 5 on the road at Dallas to push it to a Game 5 at Target Center. So only twice last season did they lose 3 times in a row. They were both in the playoffs. That's why this feels so foreign to Timberwolves fans, because we're not used to it. The Wolves had so many long winning streaks last year. They had one blip in January where they lost 5 of 7 games overall. They had another blip in early March where they lost 4 out of 6, but never was it 3 in a row. There was always a bit of a, okay. And the March one happened around the Towns injury. I think Towns got hurt during that stretch. The January one, it was kind of weird, like a weird schedule, a difficult schedule. Like all kinds of things happen over the course of a season, but losing 3 games in a row was not something that Chris Finch's team had done last year. So it feels especially gross for it to happen, and to happen against inferior opponents. Miami sans Jimmy Butler, Portland sans DeAndre Ayton, and for really, all but 5 minutes in the last 2 nights, no Anthony Simons and no Robert Williams III in this game, and he was fantastic on Tuesday. I think everybody thought the Wolves were going to blow Portland out in Game 1 in the NBA Cup game on Tuesday. And then after losing last night, I think everybody, including myself, thought, okay, they're going to win big Wednesday. And the opposite happened. They didn't get blown out, but they got beaten down ultimately. I think that's another good way to describe this, because the Wolves looked completely beaten down by the end of this one, or not even by the end of it, mid-game. They had their tail between their legs, and it was like they knew they were going to lose. They looked defeated. That to me is the most concerning thing. And while it can flip quickly, the attitude around a team can change quickly. And I don't want to get too into hysterics here, because look, it was an anomaly that the Wolves only lost, that they didn't lose 3 in a row at all last regular season. Like, that's not the norm either. So we also have to recognize that. We have to recognize that, the implementation of new pieces like Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo is going to take time. I don't think we can undersell, and I guess maybe I have undersold it up until now, the absence of Kyle Anderson with that bench unit, as good as the bench unit is or should be, and has been really until this 3-game losing streak. And just a week ago, I was talking about how DiVincenzo and Naz and Alexander Walker were arguably the 3 best players for the Wolves through the first, 9 games of the season. Like, Alexander Walker and Naz have mostly been good the last 3 games, but DiVincenzo has not been. He's been pretty bad the last 3 games. It's just amazing how things can switch so quickly. Like, say the Wolves win in Sacramento Friday in an NBA Cup game. Say they win in Sacramento for the second time this season already. They beat Phoenix at home at the matinee on Sunday, and then they get at Toronto next Thursday after 3 days off, and they could be at 9-6 going to Boston the following Sunday. Like that's a completely feasible path. They could easily do that. Right now, it doesn't feel likely, because there just isn't positivity around the team, and nobody has played well through this stretch, except for maybe Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like, he's probably been their most consistent player, and maybe Naz. I mean, Ant had another uneven game. We'll get into that here a bit. But in this game, I want to talk about what happened here and why it was different than Tuesday. So we'll dig into that a bit. The start of the game actually looked a little bit positive for Minnesota. There was a bit of energy, a bit of juice, and then things just tumbled downhill in a bad way very quickly. But again, a different performance than Tuesday. Like, Tuesday was just flat the whole time. This one it started up here, and then it plummeted, and it never recovered, and there was never any sense, once it was a 5-point game midway through the fourth quarter, and it felt like it was a 15-point game. Seriously, like it stuck at 5 points, because Portland was also very bad in this game for long stretches, because they're Portland and they were shorthanded and they are bad. But the Wolves could not capitalize, and that 5 points, even though it sat there and it felt like 15, it wasn't until then. It was at least double figures. Portland suddenly pushed it up further and further. We'll get into that a bit here, and then we'll get to individual studs and duds, which is it's going to be duds and duds here today. So we'll get to all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. There's plenty of different things you could do over at Game Time Picks. There are plenty of different things you can find. They also have curation that will make it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Any of those live events that you like to attend, they've got them there. Plus, you could toggle on the all-in pricing feature to allow you to see your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy with their seat views. And the lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you think you find a better price somewhere else. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. So what happened in this one? Well, Tuesday, let's start there, was a perfect storm. The Wolves were pretty flat, and Portland played great. They played out of their minds. They made a bunch of threes. Portland was 18 of 32 on threes on Tuesday, 56% from the field. Minnesota turned it over 21 times. I mean, the Portland out-rebounded Minnesota by 7. Like, the Wolves turned it over way too much. They were terrible on the glass. They gave up, 11 offensive rebounds? Yep. And Portland shot 56% from 3. So it was a combination of the Wolves not playing well, not having any urgency, being very sloppy with the ball, and Portland shooting the lights out. And it led to a blowout 14-point win for Portland. Wednesday was not that. Wednesday, the Wolves came out with energy. They built an early double-digit lead. I think they led by like 12-2 or 14-3 or something like that right away. The Wolves looked ready to go. Ant came out like a almost literally a whirling dervish. He had like some crazy out of control 360 that almost turned into a layup that he banged in off the glass, but it didn't go in. But like in a good way, like they were aggressive in a good way, other than that out of control layup attempt. And there was a bit of a push by Portland at the end of the first quarter, but Minnesota was up 10 at the end of one, and it felt like they were playing with some juice. And then the juice disappeared and very quickly gave way to kind of a little bit of apathy. And then there was panic. It was a tie game at halftime. It was a tie game at the end of the third quarter. And somewhere along there, it turned from like, hey, we're too cool for school, we're going to win this game. And then it was kind of like, we're depressed and now we think we have no chance. And then it I think it gave birth to like panic. On defense, there was a lot of gambling. Jaden, DiVincenzo, Ant, just gambling and losing, giving up position and giving up free runs to the basket. Just poor perimeter defense. They started by having Rudy try and play closer to the level, and then Portland, was throwing lobs, and then he tried to drop, and they got beat off the dribble and couldn't recover, and it's just nothing like what we saw defensively last year. And then on offense, part of the panic was rush shots. Just like, oh man, we got to get these threes up at the rim. We got to get them up. We got to shoot our way out of it. Like, we're eventually going to make threes. And as a general rule, I think when people rip on like, oh, they're just trying to shoot their way out of it, or, the 3-point shot's not working, you got to go inside. Like, that's all cliche stuff. And there's no evidence to suggest, that I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole too far, but like that the hot hand thing is real. I know that for individual players it is, but for the team, I understand the mental side of it. Like, generally speaking, I'm cool with just shooting your way out of a 3-point slump. Like, because you got to do it at some point is kind of the logic. And if the shots are there, they're there. But in this case, they were rushed shots. I don't mean the volume of shots the Wolves shot. I mean, would they attempt 39 threes in this game? Portland attempted 25. 39 threes, especially when you're trailing for a decent chunk of the fourth quarter, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. It was even earlier in the game when it was kind of back and forth in the middle stages. It was the quality of shot and the pace at which they were taking them. It was like a panic offensive rebound. I got to get this right back up at the rim from 3-point range, or I've got to, I got to hit the trail guy who's got to shoot a 3 kind of semi on the move in transition because we got to get this up at the rim. I just thought it just reeked of panic. Again, the gambling on defense, the lack of contain on the perimeter, and containing the ball on the perimeter, and then rushing some of these 3-point shots. And the quality of shot they were getting, I thought it was contagious the other way, right? Like, because early on, they got a couple good looks early that didn't go in, and then they kind of panicked a little bit, and those didn't go in, and then they still had open looks toward the end of the game that didn't go in. Nas hit a big three that kept him in it. Nah had I think maybe 1 second half three. But Nas and Nickeil Alexander-Walker were the only guys that made more than 1 3 in this game. Ant was 0 of 9. DiVincenzo was 0 of 6. So the two guys that are supposed to be two of their best 3-point shooters, Mike Conley rested tonight, didn't play, combined to shoot 0 of 15 from 3. And as a team, they were 7 of 39, 17.9% from outside the arc. So this was a different way to lose. In some ways more concerning because they just let it slowly slip away from them over the course of, call it 36 minutes right after the first quarter. On the other hand, at least they came out well, I guess, in the first quarter. And then at some point they just missed open shots, which that's not to I'm not letting them off the hook by saying that, because you still have to make the shots, right? That's a big part of being in the NBA is making open shots. But at least the effort level was there to start, and at least they were generating some of these open shots. They just missed them. And clearly at some point, again, to go along with the panic stuff, Ant never had his legs in this game. Second night of a back-to-back, playing, high 30 minutes last night, 40 minutes on Wednesday. There were a couple 3-point attempts in the fourth quarter where they just didn't have a chance. He just did not have the legs. And that goes back to, I talked a little bit about this on Wednesday's show following the loss on Tuesday, the rotation stuff. And we'll hit on this Friday. In a game where Mike Conley rested, they still only played 7 guys, played more than 10 minutes in this game. Rob Dillingham played 9 minutes. Josh Minott played 4, and Minott's minutes were all in the first half. So that is something that's going to add up if this team does not, give Ant a few less minutes here and there. It's maybe less of a concern for the Alexander Walkers of the world. But Randle played 37 minutes, Ant played 40. That is a burden for Anthony Edwards to play 40 minutes this often, this early in the season. What do you have to show for it? They're 6-6, Anyway, different way to lose. The fourth quarter execution stuff. Portland jumped out. I mentioned this earlier. They got up by 5 with it was 9 minutes left, and it sat there forever. And the game was right there for Minnesota. They were down by 2 possessions, but it felt like a 15-point game. Seriously, it was 83-78 at the 9:58 mark after the Blazers, had a couple bad turnovers. The Blazers go on a quick, Minnesota was up 2. Okay, Nas made the first bucket of the fourth quarter. They're up 2. The Blazers go on a quick 7-0 run. 9:58 mark, the Wolves call timeout. And the score stays at 5 for another 2 minutes. Nobody scores again until the 8-minute mark when Kamara makes a shot for the Blazers. And the Wolves' possessions in between there, you ready for this? Alexander Walker misses a step-back 3. Wolves, get a stop, get the ball. Randle gets blocked by Klingon, who is fantastic. Wolves get the rebound. Randle misses a step-back 3. Goes back to the Blazers. The Blazers miss a shot. Then they turn it over after an offensive rebound. They challenge it. What call was that? Oh, that was I don't know. I don't remember what that one was. It doesn't matter. And then the Wolves get the ball back, and Ant loses the ball out of bounds. Turnover. Those are their possessions. So missed step back 3, block shot, and a out of bounds lost ball turnover. Then the Blazers get it back. They score. Alexander Walker loses the ball out of bounds, turnover. Blazers score again. Now it's a 9-point game. And now it really feels like it's over. It felt like it was over and it was stuck at 5 points for 2 minutes. But now it's to 9, and then it gets to 11 after a pair of Shaedon Sharpe free throws. That was that Nas, blocking foul. That was obviously a blocking foul. The Wolves challenged it. And at that point, it just never, I know they got it back to within, 6? Around 3 minutes left. They got it to 5. They got it to 4 after the Rudy and one with 1:45 left. But again, it never felt, when it was 5 points with 10 minutes to go, that's when it felt like in this particular game, the walls were closing in and it was basically over. And that's when the team's on a bad stretch and you've lost faith as a fan in everything this team is doing and the vibe around the team. And again, I'll say it. I feel like it needs to be said. it can change like that. Just like things, up 8 against Miami on Sunday, they're going to grind out their 4th win in a row. Then they get 2 in Portland. Like, hey, things are great. It could change just that quickly. If they blow out Sacramento, if they get a big close late win against Sacramento Friday, either one of those, if they get a win, period, Friday, and then some opportunity, an opportunity to win a tough game on Sunday, things can change back. I mean, it can turn on a dime. But there's no two ways about the vibe, the aura around the team is not positive right now. Let's talk about a couple of individual player performances, and that's how we'll close the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. No line for the Wolves game on Friday night yet at Sacramento. Not surprising. The 2 NBA games on Thursday, Dallas at the Jazz. The Mavs are 9-point favorites against the worst team in the West. And Lakers at Spurs. Lakers are 2.5-point favorites. Last I checked, the Lakers were, I think, in overtime here on Wednesday night. I think it just finished. They ended up beating Memphis by 5. So, those lines probably make sense. I would be on board with, I don't know, Wemby with what Wemby did on Wednesday, back-to-back. I don't know. Spurs plus 2.5 at home. That's not terrible. I would probably take Dallas -9 at Utah if I was betting the spread on either one of these games. But check that out. Also, Thursday Night Football, of course, happening too. I think it's a good game. It's like Cincinnati and the Eagles, maybe. I don't know. It's supposed to be a good game on Thursday night, if I remember right. So check that out over at FanDuel. And of course, on FanDuel.com, you can get started with $150. Oh, Commanders and Eagles. That's what it is. Washington, Philadelphia. Eagles are favored by 3.5 at home. FanDuel.com, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's talk studs and duds. And as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, on my wonderful graphic there, it's duds only today. The only guy that I even considered to give a stud to was Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I thought he played well. I know he had the most turnovers on the team, but the Wolves only turned it over 13 times as a team. I talked about how they turned it over, I think, 21 times on Tuesday. That was a much bigger issue in that game. Yes, there were some bad ones. Yes, there were some inopportune ones. But I thought Alexander-Walker was the Wolves' best player in this game. Nas was pretty good too. Randle's line looks good. He had 20 and 10 on 20 on 15 shots, but I actually don't think Julius Randle played all that well. He played a nice role in the middle of the game, keeping them in it. But I wouldn't give him a stud. I really don't think anyone deserves it. Those are the 3 best players for the Wolves: Nas, Alexander-Walker, and Randle in some order. Duds. Dante DiVincenzo was probably the worst player on the floor for the Wolves in this game. He had 2 points on 10 shots, 1 of 10 shooting, 0 of 6 outside the arc, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. He didn't have any turnovers in 22 minutes, but he tried to clearly shoot his way out of this slump that he's in. Did not work. So he gets a dud. I'm going to go Rudy. I know Rudy had 12 and 11, but he really struggled to protect the paint. Donovan Clingan was a revelation for the Blazers. He had 17 and 12 with 8 blocks in 31 minutes. He was a plus 15. He was the only member of the Blazers starting lineup that had a positive point differential, and it was a plus 15, a positive plus minus. Gobert was a minus 8 for whatever that's worth. 12 and 11. Again, looks good in the box score, but did not protect the paint well. And he wasn't good Tuesday either. And I call it like it is on the show. And I made the mistake of reading some comments on X of people talking about Rudy in the wake of John Krasinski or somebody tweeted about, posted about Rudy not having a good game or the Wolves not protecting the paint. And the comments were I feel like I need to say this. I almost need to say this once the show. Rudy Gobert is an incredible defender. He is still, he's probably not going to win Defensive Player of the Year award, certainly not at this pace. He's still a top 5 defender in the NBA. I don't understand Like, he's a walking top 10, probably top 6 or 7 defense himself. He's still an incredible player. Both things can be true. He was bad in Portland in both of these games. He just was. He was great last week. There was a game last week. I forget what one it was, but I basically, I thought he basically won the game for the Wolves. Was it the Charlotte game? Or maybe it was the Denver game. One of those games, it might have been the Denver game, where he was just phenomenal. Certainly the Toronto game he dominated in. He was the best player on the floor, and he was not good in either one of these games. I can call it like it is. That's what happened here. Gobert gets a dud. DiVincenzo gets a dud. Ant had flashes in this game. I mean, Ant was 10 of 16 on twos, which is nice. He was 4 of 4 at the line. Good to see him make free throws, but he's got to get there more than 4 times. He was 0 of 9 on threes. He did turn it over 3 times. He did have 4 steals, 4 assists, 4 rebounds. I didn't feel like he was actively bad, but this was just kind of I think a lot like Tuesday, like just an okay game from a superstar who's got to pull the Wolves out. He's got to do his part to pull the Wolves out of this. And he was not a calming force. He was not a compelling force for the Wolves, other than the beginning of the first quarter when I thought he set a really positive tone. And there was this moment after the quick dust up that actually it was Ant, when Ant had that really quick dust up with Delano Banton with the Blazers before the jump ball between McDaniels and jump ball number 2 between McDaniels and Klingon. Near the end of the game, where it looked like that was going to propel the Wolves. Nas hits a 3, Ants into it, and then Shaedon Sharpe gets the crazy putback dunk, which was just a nuts play. And that was that. But Ants just got to do a little bit more. And it's like in the movie I Love You, Man, but he's got to do less at the same time. Like, I understand that's an impossible thing to ask, but he's got to do more by doing less. And, not forcing things and, picking his spots a little bit better. Always having that intensity on both ends of the floor instead of starting with it and letting it fade and then trying to quickly get it back. Like, it's just, I'm not giving him a dud because there were moments where he was what was keeping this team in it, but he's got to be better. We should talk about Minot playing 4 minutes only in the first half. I thought he was good. He missed an above the break 3 that, was just kind of a whatever shot. He had a nice dunk. I thought he was active. He had 1 silly foul defensively. But he's got to get more run. Dillingham, I thought, had some nice passes. Look, I have been at the back of the line of people clamoring to see Dillingham because that's not the answer if you want the team to win now. It's the answer if you want the team to win in, February, March, and in 2026, fall of 25 into 26. You need to see some Rob Dillingham before then. But Rob Dillingham right now is not going to help you win very many games. He's just not. It doesn't mean he shouldn't play. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's also not feasible to play 7.5 man rotation for 82 games. So he's got to play, but it doesn't mean those minutes are always going to be fruitful. There's going to be a lot of growing pains. And we saw that in this game. I will also, but I say that to set up my next point, which is he was a team worst plus minus of -13 in 9 minutes. I don't think he played poorly. Yes, he had 3 turnovers in 9 minutes. But he also had, I think I counted 4 passes to wide open shooters where the guys just missed the shot. I think 3 of them were threes and 1 was a mid-range 2. And they were good passes. It was the right read. I thought they were delivered on time on target, and the guys just missed the shots because that's the kind of game the Wolves had. They shot 17% from 3 for crying out loud. That's not Rob Dillingham's fault. In the box score, those are not assists, but they were passes that should have been assists if the NBA shooters on the other receiving end of the pass had knocked down their open shots. So that's not Rob Dillingham's fault. The 3 turnovers, the -13, the -13 is not a -13 if those dudes make their shots. If they make 3 of those 4 shots, we're talking about a -4, right? Probably. It's not quite that clean, but you know what I mean? So both things, again, are true here. Rob Dillingham is probably not yet a good NBA player. He probably will not be a net positive for a little while. Doesn't mean he should never play. It also doesn't mean he played terribly in this game. I thought he played okay. I didn't really have a problem with how Rob Dillingham played, and I'm hoping that he gets, even if Conley's, they need to start to get a little more Minot, a little more Dillingham. I'm still not against Joe Ingles getting some run, especially if these guys aren't shooting threes. Not that a guy that hasn't played much is going to come in and start lighting the world on fire, but Jingles was he's been a good 3-point shooter every year. So just give him a bit of run here and there if you need a bit of juice offensively, and maybe have him play a bit of that team defender role that Kyle Anderson did. I know he's not as good of a defender as Kyle Anderson, but I feel like there could be something there. So we'll see if that changes. I mentioned Donovan Clingan having a great game. I should shout that out. And then also Shaedon Sharpe, career high 33 points. I've always liked him. He was great in this game. 12 of 23 shooting. I liked him in the draft too, by the way, a couple years ago. 3 of 10 outside the arc. Got to the line 7 times. Had the crazy tip dunk that took this thing from like, the Wolves going to come back? Are they fired up now? To that's it. Like, they're not coming back from this. So great game for those guys. And, the shorthanded Blazers team, they're playing hard. After I talked about this Tuesday, but after Chauncey Billups called them soft the other day, after they were blown up by, I think it was Memphis, man, they came out ready to play. You got to credit them too. I think it was more Tuesday was equal parts Portland playing good, the Wolves playing bad. Wednesday was Minnesota disinterested, lackadaisical, down on themselves, woe is me, panicking. It was more that than anything else. And then a little bit of Clingan and Shaedon Sharpe being awesome. But for the most part, the Blazers didn't actually play that well on Wednesday either. All right, that's all I have for you today. I'll be back on Friday. We'll set you up for Wolves Kings Friday night. We'll relive a bit of that Wolves win over the Kings, their first win of the season back that Thursday in October. I don't know, more positive times, I guess, at that point. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Maybe talk some more lineup data after this terrible 2-game set in Portland. What's changed about that? Maybe, sleeping on this, like maybe there's a bit of a rehash of some of this with some more organized thoughts that we'll get to Friday. So all that'll be on Friday's show. We'll get you ready for the weekend, Wolves Kings Friday night. And then on Sunday afternoon, a tough matinee at home against Phoenix, who's been great. Of course, the Kevin Durant injury is a thing, but they've struggled since then too. So we'll talk a bit about that on Friday's show too. So big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. You can also watch on YouTube. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder about the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast. We'll catch you next time.